Alex Pretti was the confirmation liberals needed to show the world that Trump is indeed Hitler and that fascists are killing their political opponents. But nothing is as it seems. Peter Schweizer, the author of the book The Invisible Coup, reveals a stunning finding from his investigation. Many of the protests taking place all over the country right now are puppeteered by the Chinese Communist Party, the Muslim Brotherhood, and even the Mexican government. We've got all of that and much more in this eye-opening episode of Relatable. Hey guys, welcome to Relatable. Happy Friday. Hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far. The episode or the interview that we're about to play for you is so incredibly mind-blowing. But before we get into it, I want to give an update on what's going on in Minneapolis, specifically with Alex Pretti. Now, if you've been listening to the past couple of episodes, if you've been following on social media, you know who this man is. This was a man who is a VA nurse who was impeding a law enforcement operation with ICE, and he was tragically killed by ICE. And there has been a lot of discussion and conflict surrounding what actually happened. Was this a justified shooting or not? I've gotten lots of pushback from some people for saying we still don't know all of the facts surrounding what happened. And that is true. There are multiple camera angles, but we still don't know everything the officers saw and heard in that moment that may have made them feel like their life and other people's lives were at risk. So we're going to wait to see the results of those investigations. But one thing that we now know not to be true was that he was just a peaceful bystander. That is the caricature that we have seen described over the past several days by people in the media, by online activists, to say that he was just standing there with his phone, wanting to cause no problems at all, and that he was completely unjustifiably targeted by ICE. We can have an issue with how his life was taken, but to paint that kind of picture, we now know is just not true. So this footage was released from 11 days prior to Pretti losing his life that seems to show Pretti. We're saying seems to show because while this has seemingly been verified by outlets like the BBC, I still can't see his full face. He's got the same sunglasses and hat on, but there are media outlets verifying that this is, in fact, Alex Pretti. So here is this person agitating law enforcement very aggressively days before he was killed. Let's play SOT 3.
This is a moment the news movement filmed on January 13th in Minneapolis, showing a man who appears to be Alex Pretti interacting with federal immigration agents 11 days before Border Patrol shot and killed him.
We also know from a separate report that Alex Pretti had suffered a broken rib several days prior to being killed. And it looks like, if you watch the rest of this video, that was probably from this interaction. After he kicks the taillight out of the vehicle of ICE, one of the officers gets out and tackles him to the ground, which is justified, by the way, and that is probably where he got injured. But not only is he taunting law enforcement in this way, he is also blatantly saying, "Assault me." Here's SOT 2.
Look at you! Pepper spray! You guys!
Okay, so this is why I say we just don't know all of the facts and the extenuating circumstances surrounding when he was killed. Obviously, this person had been very aggressively agitating ICE for several days. Did they have their eye on him, knowing that he was a powder keg that could explode at any moment? Had they seen how he acted and how he spoke and the threats that he made for several days that made them think, okay, we've got to watch this guy because he is on edge and we have a very good reason to believe that if armed, he would harm us? And is there good reason to believe that they would be skeptical of someone who is carrying a gun with 2 extra magazines to a demonstration like this Is there good reason for them to believe that he actually was a threat? Do you have the right to carry a gun? Yes, in a lawful way. He didn't have his license on him at the time, so that is unlawful in the state of Minnesota, but you do have a Second Amendment right to carry a gun. Do you have a First Amendment right to protest? Yes, but this was not a protest. He wasn't protesting out there in the street. He was trying to impede completely justified and valid law enforcement operations. I still say there is a question of whether that specific shooting at that time was justified, but I'm not going to buy into the narrative that is being pushed upon us. This is something that progressives do a lot. They not only say, hey, this was wrong, what happened to George Floyd in this moment was wrong, but then they also venerate these people, almost to the place of being these perfect saints. We actually saw that. We talked about that on Wednesday, the weird AI enhancement of Alex Pretti, and we can put that up. We've got the picture on the right that MS Now, MSNBC, and other outlets were showing. And then we've got his actual picture on the left. And this really was displayed on MS Now. And the link was going around to the YouTube segment. And then they ended up editing out this AI enhanced photo that they had been circulating and other outlets had been circulating. And it's just very strange. Like, if you're just trying to highlight injustice, why do you have to make him tanner? Why do you have to make his shoulders more broad? Why do you have to shorten his nose and widen his face? Why do you have to make him look more handsome, arguably, than he is in the left side? If it is just to highlight injustice, then you don't have to tell this kind of lie. And we've got Ana Navarro on CNN. She's saying, look, Alex Pretti was perfect. He's the kind of guy who would babysit your dog. Here's Thought 6.
They chose to, they killed the wrong guy, right? Because this is like the perfect guy. Alex Pretti is the guy you would want to date your daughter. The guy you would want your son to grow up to be a decent human being who was serving humanity, serving sick veterans, who is, there is nothing that has been said about that man that isn't wonderful. And so they can't malign him. They can't malign him because we have the videos.
Okay, I've got more to say about this in just a second. Let me pause, tell you about our first sponsor for the day. That is We Heart Nutrition. Y'all, I take all of my We Heart Nutrition supplements every day. I take their magnesium, their prenatal vitamins. I take their omega-3s. I take their iron. I take their probiotic. Last night, I took an immunity supplement because I'm starting to feel a little down for the count, and I just want to make sure that my body has everything it needs to fight back against illness. Y'all, We Heart Nutrition has been such a game changer for me since the beginning of 2024. I found myself getting sick all the time. My body just wasn't equipped to fight back the way that it needs to. And this has been such a game changer for my immune system, my hair, skin, and nails. Plus, We Heart Nutrition is unapologetically Christian pro-life. They donate to pregnancy centers with every single sale. Kristen and Jacob, the Christian owners of this company, are just awesome. They're the real deal. You will not regret getting all of your supplements from We Heart Nutrition. So make the switch today. Go to weheartnutrition.com. When you use code Allie, you get 20% off your order, no matter how many times you've ordered. weheartnutrition.com, code Allie. Here's what the media is doing, whether they realize it or not. They're pushing people who were previously sympathetic to Alex Pretti into the camp of callousness. Because we can all have a logical conversation, a compassionate conversation about whether or not what happened in that moment was justified. But when you zoom out and you see the person he apparently was, an agitator to law enforcement, it makes people wonder if there was some kind of justification. But then when you look to the media and you see them trying to make him more handsome, when you see someone like Ana Navarro saying that he was a saint, I've seen this all over Instagram, that he was basically this perfect, compassionate veteran who did nothing wrong, who was just there trying to help a woman up who had just been pushed to the ground, and he was targeted for no reason just because he was filming with his phone. When you see that kind of caricature, you're actually pushing people away from defending him and pushing people away from being persuaded by the progressive narrative. People are like, you know what? I don't really think that I'm going to latch on to the propaganda campaign that you are pushing. So I just want to remind you that there are some questions that you should ask whenever anything emotional happens, whether it's George Floyd on the concrete, or whether it is Alex Pretti, or whether it is the 5-year-old that was supposedly detained by ICE and used as bait, which we now know is not true. And yet those emotional images of that precious child wearing the blue toboggan, I mean, that pulls on your heartstrings. And when you see that video completely decontextualized and the caption says, this person was arrested by ICE and used as bait, but his mom was scared to come outside, like it's really easy just to believe that. And actually you feel like a bad person for not believing it. If you don't believe it and you don't repeat what they say and you don't call for an in for ICE when you see that 5-year-old supposedly victimized, then you feel like a bad person. You feel like a coward. And yet, of course, that's been debunked. His father ran away from him. His mother said, no, I don't want that child to come inside. Maybe she was scared. The ICE agents took care of him, bought him a Happy Meal. But of course, you didn't see that originally. So next time, before you react immediately, wait. Ask a few questions, at least 4 questions. Ask, 1, how do I know this to be true? How do I know this to be true? You should ask that when you're listening to this podcast too. How do I know that to be true? Number 2, is there more context that I'm not seeing or hearing? Is there more to this video? Was there something that happened before or after? What is going on here that I don't know? Number 3, is there an alternative explanation to what this person is claiming? So when it came to that little boy, the caption said he's being detained by ICE. Is it possible that that caption is not true? Is it possible that something else is happening that I can't see and I don't know, and this person sharing this video does not know? And number 4, what are the sources for this information? For example, I saw this horrible story. This woman, an illegal immigrant, she gave birth here. Her child was in the NICU. And the story read that this woman was being detained, and she was detained temporarily. She was then reunited with her child, but her milk dried up during that time, and it was horrible. And of course, as a mom who has given birth to 3 kids, that pulls on my heartstrings, and it does make me sad. And it's okay to feel sad for her and to feel compassion. We should. But what I noticed when I was reading this story is that there was no source for this information. This journalist never said, I talked to the woman, I talked to the doctor at the hospital, I verified this information, here's my source. And then I saw commentators just repeating the story as if it's fact, never asking, but how do I know this is true and where am I getting this information? So I know that I've said this a million times. I am not trying to get you not to feel. I'm not trying to get you not to have compassion, or even for your compassionate instinct to be arrested when you see sad pictures like the little boy in the blue toboggan. I'm trying to get you not to allow your feelings to lead you to a place that is not true. People got really mad at me when I talked about the messaging battle that is going on, but there is a messaging battle going on. And public messaging influences public policy, which influences the public. Politics matter because policy matters because people matter. And so what we believe and what we repeat, even if it's done in the name of compassion, has a real impact. And so before you reshare, before you repost, before you regurgitate the talking points, ask yourself these questions. And remember, your words have an impact. It's really easy for us to see stories like this and to selfishly think, well, how can I look good? How can I make sure that I'm checking the box or scoring the point or making sure that everyone knows that I'm a good person? But Christians are called to something much more thoughtful than that. You're called to the truth in love. Remember 1 Corinthians 13:6, love never rejoices in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Truth and love always goes hand in hand for the Christian, factual, logical truth, and also biblical truth. And the reality is that what we're seeing right now, the outrage campaigns, all of the influencers posting things, trying to pressure you into saying the same things they are, the anti-ICE sentiment, none of that is really organic. Yes, their feelings might be real, but it is all being orchestrated by people both in and outside of the country who want to see the destabilization of American cities. We touched on this just slightly on Wednesday, but today we're going to get into it. I'm talking the Chinese Communist Party, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hezbollah, These entities all throughout the world who see the West and America as enemy number one are using chaotic moments like this to weaponize compassion against the United States. We don't have to play a part in that, but in order for us to opt out in a healthy way, we have to know what's going on. And that's why we're talking to Peter Schweizer today. He wrote an entire book on this, how progressives are using immigration as a weapon and how these bad actors throughout the world are using very sophisticated and well-funded propaganda campaigns to lie to you and to change the makeup of the United States. It's going to blow your mind. Before we get into that conversation with Peter, let me go ahead and pause. I'll tell you about our second sponsor for the day, and that is Legacy Box. If you're anything like my mom, you've got VHS tapes lying around, you've got boxes and boxes of Polaroids and pictures going all the way back to the 1960s. You don't want to lose all of those. Those are precious memories that you want to pass down to your kids and grandkids. It's so much easier to do that when those videos and pictures are digitized, and that's exactly what Legacy Box does. When you put all of these VHS tapes, these home videos, and these pictures into the box that Legacy Box sends you, you send it back to them. And then they take all of those and they digitize it in a really high quality, really efficient way. They send you back all of your stuff as well as the file that has saved all of your memories. This is not just a someday project that you have to keep on putting off, and you don't have to do it yourself. Who has the time or the knowledge to do any of that? Let Legacy Box take care of that. This would be a great gift, not only to yourself, but also to your mom, your grandmother, the loved ones in your life that have all of these memories they want to pass down. Go to legacybox.com/Allie. You'll save 55% when you use my link, legacybox.com/Allie. Peter, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. First of all, congratulations. Your new book, #1 on Amazon. It's about to be a #1 New York Times bestseller. Is that right?
That's right. Very excited. The response has been amazing, and I'm glad the word is getting out.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me your reaction to what's going on in Minneapolis right now, especially in light of what you've just written about in this book.
Well, I think what's happening in Minneapolis is sort of a microcosm of a larger issue, and that is what I call the weaponization of immigration. We've been having an immigration debate in this country, which is good and healthy, about how it affects our economy, how it affects safety in our streets, getting these rapists off the streets, et cetera. But there's something more going on, and that's this weaponization of immigration. So what do I mean by that? There are foreign actors. Some of them are foreign governments like China, like Mexico. Others are foreign movements like the Muslim Brotherhood, who have weaponized immigration by importing or bringing foreign political, sometimes violent networks into our country. And this, I think, is important to understand, that you have people that come here that want to be part of the American dream, that want to embrace it, but you also have these very nefarious actors, and we're not able to sort between the two. So the clash and the violence and the corruption that we're seeing in Minneapolis is happening in Minneapolis, but it's also happening around the country, from Los Angeles to New York City. And it's part of a larger, what I call, civilizational struggle between the United States and these nefarious actors.
Okay, tell me how exactly this works, because from my end as an Instagram user, I see a bunch of these influencers and all of these people posting anti-ICE, anti-immigration enforcement content. And it seems organic. These people are crying into the camera about how awful this is that we're deporting illegal aliens. But you're telling me that this is not really organic. So how does this work?
Yeah, some of it's obviously organic, but to your point, yeah, a lot of it is being generated and created. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So the government of Mexico, people kind of view Mexico as kind of this corrupt, hapless government. They really can't get anything through. They actually have a very aggressive program in the United States to meddle in our politics in really, really direct ways. So, for example, they have this network of Mexican government officials who actually live inside the United States. These are senior government officials that answer to the Mexican government, but they actually live in the United States. And some of them are involved in fanning the flames and even organizing some of of these violent protests we've seen. So, for example, when we had the riots in Los Angeles last year, there were several Mexican officials, I named them, I quote them in the book, that were fanning the flames. They were on social media. They were connected with the groups that were engaging in these violent protests. You had last year a Mexican official named Alejandro Robles. He's the head of international operations for the Morena Party, which is the ruling party of Mexico. That's the party that the current president is aligned with. And he, in 2025, was going across the United States to, in his words, organize the militancy. And he bragged about how he and migrants and people he was working with were at, quote, the forefront of civil resistance in America, end quote. This is, again, a foreign government official who lives in Ontario, California. Wow. And he was meeting with people like the People's Forum, which is an Antifa group in New York, and he was meeting with many others. Then you look at what's going on in Minneapolis, and you notice that the Twin Cities, of course, St. Paul, has a Mexican consulate there. And there are several groups, Clues, and another one's called MIRAC, which are involved in some of these violent protests, who do a lot of work with the Mexican embassy. Then let's switch to China just briefly. Two of the very radical groups that you see pop up all the time in these street battles, whether it's Minneapolis, Los Angeles, certainly during BLM, certainly during the anti-Israel protests across the Eastern Seaboard. These two groups are FRSO, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, and PSL, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. These are small but extremely active. They believe in direct action, which is basically violence. These two groups have committed themselves ideologically, and they are aligned with and work with the Chinese Communist Party. And some of these groups are getting funding from a gentleman named Roy Singham, a billionaire, American billionaire, who lives in Shanghai, describes himself as a Maoist, who is close to the CCP. So wow. Yes, you do have, these, let's say, women in their 50s in Minnesota that are blowing whistles and screaming and shouting right. at ICE officers. But the people that are really doing the direct action, a lot of the fighting, a lot of the, organizing, the frozen bottles of water that they're throwing at ICE officers, mm-hmm. these are these foreign involved or foreign directed entities. And that's what's really going on here.
Yes. And I want to be clear about what I was talking about earlier about these influencers who are posting this kind of anti-ICE, what I believe is propaganda. It's not that I believe those people are directly Chinese actors. They are funded by the CCP. But all of these entities you're saying is simply contributing to the chaos that is then leading possibly, and you can clarify if this is kind of not what you're arguing, but people like Renee Good or Alex Pretti to put themselves in front of ICE officers, to pretend that they're fighting Nazis, to justify this kind of agitation and impeding law enforcement operations that then is getting them killed. And then those images are used as a catalyst for even more activism to try to oppose immigration enforcement. And within all of that are these agitators and these propagandists from foreign governments that are kind of stoking the flames of this confusion. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's very well said. And look, the bottom line is, and I understand why people say we need to figure out ways to tone down the conflict, and I agree with that. But let's be honest, the goal, what they want is to ramp up the conflict. When you say we need to try to tone it down, the assumption there is that the other side also wants to tone it down. The sad reality is these hardcore activists, they want martyrs. They want people that are getting shot and getting killed because it's good for the cause. It's a horrible view, but that is what their view is. So we need to realize that. We also need to realize that this is part of a national problem. It's not just an issue related to Minneapolis. We're going to see this cropping up elsewhere. There are already efforts to organize, I think maybe happening tomorrow, a nationwide protest. And again, it's going to be direct action where they are physical confrontations with law enforcement because they want a fight. They want somebody to be severely injured or attacked because they feel like it's good for their cause and it undermines American civilization.
quick pause for our next sponsor for the day, and that is Alliance Defending Freedom. I love ADF. We had Jessica Bates, who was a client of ADF at Share the Arrows. We wanted to honor her courage. Jessica was trying to adopt 2 children in the very liberal state of Oregon, but because she is a Christian and refused to affirm that she would give kids puberty blockers if they say they wanted them, the state of Oregon refused to allow her to adopt. But because of Alliance Defending Freedom, they have defended her, and she is now on the way to being able to adopt those children out of foster care. And they do that kind of work on a daily basis all throughout the country, protecting your religious liberty, protecting all of your First Amendment rights, as well as protecting the right of girls and women to their own private spaces and private athletic teams. And I want you to support them in any way you can, praying for them, donating to them, just knowing what they're doing. Go to joinadf.com/Allie. Learn about all of the cases they're taking all the way up to the Supreme Court. Joinadf.com/Allie. You know, past governments have deported illegal aliens. Barack Obama was kind of nicknamed deporter-in-chief, and he removed about, I think it was 3 million illegal immigrants, and ICE operated in much the same way. People say, oh, he did it with due process. He did it much more humanely. Well, that's not really true. We just didn't see this kind of violent reaction, calling ICE agents Nazis, calling them Gestapo, calling Obama Hitler. That's not something that was occurring back then when he was removing families and sending them back to South America. So tell me why that is.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, people say, oh, they're walking around with masks on. Why are they walking around with masks on? They weren't doxxed 10 years ago. There weren't people running around when Obama was doing this, trying to dox and physically threaten ICE agents and their families. So there's a reason for this. And again, what's happening is very sophisticated. It's very organized. So you see, when these things happen, that they're organizing on these private chats. And a lot of these techniques are things that have been developed by, Cuban intelligence and other entities. Some of the people involved in these protests have actually been trained in Cuba, part of the so-called Venceremos brigades. So this is something that is not random. And if you watch the extended videos of what's happening in the streets, rather than these just small snippets, the organized nature of this is what happened. And so let's summarize what's at stake here, Allie, because I think people sometimes forget the larger picture. Here's the bottom line issue. Nobody seemingly disputes that federal law says that we have a right to deport these people. Nobody disputes that federal law enforcement is doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is deporting people. You have Tim Walz and you have other local officials who have decided, we don't like that federal law, so we're going to muck it up and make sure that they can't actually carry out federal law. The last time this happened was in 1950s, 1960s, Mississippi and Alabama.
Right.
It's the exact same thing.
They're
You've got
like
an
Dixie
arrogant
Crats.
governor who is saying, I don't care what the federal law says. I don't care what a national election concluded, because Donald Trump said he was going to do this. I decide that I'm not going to allow federal law to be enforced in my state. And Tim Walz is another guy who wants martyrs and wants conflict because he thinks it's a politically good issue for him.
Right. You say that this is a national problem, and it obviously is, but others have pointed out that this kind of deadly chaos is not happening in every single jurisdiction. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche pointed this out. We're also deporting illegal aliens in Texas, and we're not seeing this kind of conflict. Let's play SOT 1.
We deport 10 times the number of illegal aliens out of Texas than we do out of Minneapolis. Why do we hear nothing out of Texas about any of the same problems that we have in Minneapolis? I'll tell you why. Because in Texas, we have the cooperation and support of local law enforcement so that we can do these operations safely, keeping U.S. citizens and others protected and safe. That is not what we have in Minneapolis. And the fact that it's the administration that's being blamed for the utter failure of leadership in Minneapolis is not right. It's not appropriate.
But are you
and it's also
saying those
not
officers?
true.
Okay, so Minneapolis was also the epicenter of chaos back in 2020. Why is it that places like LA, Portland, and Minneapolis seem to just attract this kind of conflict?
It's a great question. And the answer is in order to engage in this kind of direct action successfully, you need essentially the complicit support of local authorities. You need mayors and governors who are not going to deploy local law enforcement, and you need local prosecutors that are not going to prosecute people. So, as happened in Minneapolis, you can, go into a church, take over the church service. You can threaten people. You can do a whole host of other things. You can be told to leave and ignore that request. You're going to be arrested, and local prosecutors are going to basically say, yeah, well, no, we're not going to allow this to go through. So you need to have both of those elements. And the reason that you see the fight so viciously in places like Minneapolis and California is political power. That's really the bottom line. If you look at the state of California, Allie, they have, because of illegals in the state of California, 4 more congressional seats than they would ordinarily have because of illegals in that state.
Wow.
Because when we do the census, which determines the electoral college apportionment and determines the number of congressional seats you get, we're not counting citizens, we're counting people. And so they want illegals in their state for that reason. And if 4 congressmen doesn't sound like a lot, consider the fact that illegals in California have more representation than people in 13 other U.S. states that have smaller congressional delegations. So it's an enormous political benefit. That's why you're seeing resistance in California, Illinois, Minnesota, these states that have lost large populations, since COVID, with sort of the migration from these blue states. They cannot have deportations on a large scale within their states because they will lose political power, and they will also lose money because, let's remember, federal block grants on a whole host of issues, transportation, et cetera, is again determined by the census. That's why they're fighting this so viciously. It's not humanitarian, it's for their own political benefit.
That kind of answers another question that I had is, why did we see all of this opposition to ICE after the widespread fraud in Minneapolis was revealed? I mean, now we know that these Somalians, some legal, some illegal, were using daycares, adult daycare centers, whatever that is, to get a lot of money from the taxpayer, and that money is seemingly being funneled to the Democrat Party, other politicians in the state of Minnesota. And it's just strange that, people in Minnesota would say, after I realized my taxpayer money is being stolen from me for nefarious ends, that's when I'm going to get really angry that people are being deported. That to me doesn't seem like an organic, logical reaction.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think that the fraud in Somalia, again, we're missing, I think, the larger issue here. Not to say that a multi-billion-dollar fraud in the state of Minnesota is not a big deal, but I think the way people have viewed this is that this is kind of, again, people come here from Somalia. It's one of the most corrupt places on the planet. That's not me saying that. That's what all the surveys say. And so people say, well, this is just kind of what you would expect. But this is, again, actually highly organized. And one of the things I point out in the book is when it comes to groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, they are very active in America's mosques. A lot of the mosques in the United States are run by individuals who are here on R1 visas, religious worker visas from overseas. They're actually not from the United States. And one of the things they preach is this sort of strange notion that public assistance fraud is like a tax on non-Muslims that are owed to Muslims.
Wow.
It's called jizrat, I think is what they call it. And there are preachers, including in places like Minnesota, who have said this, who have argued this. So it's not just that you have people saying, hey, we think we're going to engage in fraud. You actually have people that are encouraging this kind of behavior, at least among people that are part of their faith. obviously, a lot of Muslims would reject this view, but the bottom line, this is a very vocal movement that's pushed by the Muslim Brotherhood to engage in this kind of fraud, that it's legitimate behavior. And that makes it even more difficult to tamp down on. And I think that's the reason we're going to see more of these cases involving people in these communities, and not just in Minnesota.
Another pause to tell you about Good Ranchers. Y'all, I've been telling you about Good Ranchers for, it's been 5 years now. We always have a freezer full of Good Ranchers meat. We've got their better than organic chicken. We've got their ground beef, all different cuts of steak, all of their seafood. This is what we eat every night. It has given me so much peace of mind and has just taken something off of my mental load to know that I have at least one portion of every meal accounted for. I don't have to worry about going into the grocery store and wondering, where is this meat from? What is the quality? Every single cut of meat comes from an American farm or a ranch. They also have seed oil-free chicken nuggets, which is like unheard of. Even if you go to the health food store and you see the organic chicken nuggets, you look on the back, it's got canola oil, all kinds of inflammatory stuff. You never have to worry about that with Good Ranchers. What I love about them, they don't only support American farms or ranches, they also support our veterans. Right now, they are donating a portion of their profits to paralyzed veterans of America. That's perfect, especially this year as we celebrate America turning 250. So support veterans, support American farms and ranches, support this Christian family-owned American company and Good Ranchers. Go to goodranchers.com, use code Allie at checkout. You'll get an extra $25 off your first order. Goodranchers.com, code Allie. Can we hone in on how the Muslim Brotherhood and Islam is being used as a vehicle to change American culture and to change the electorate and to shift power into the hands of one political party?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm gonna read you two quotes, just because I think it's better than me just saying it. And it gives an indication of where these activists are coming from. The first one is from the head of Florida CARE. CARE, of course, you've talked about it. Others have talked about it. Council on American Islamic Relations. This is from a 2025 speech. Listen to what he says. How do we even justify living here in the United States? I mean, why are we living here? Have we asked ourselves this question? Why are we living in the United States? The only answer, I believe, is excusable and justifiable, is if we are living here to shift this country's political direction and spiritual direction together. Or another quote from a board member of CARE, of the national board, quote, ultimately, we can never be full citizens of this country because there is no way we can be fully committed to the institutions of this country. We can be citizens in the sense that we try to influence American policy. So it begins with this very aggressive effort within the Islamic community to say, no, don't assimilate. And if you do assimilate, we are going to ostracize you. We are going to attack you and criticize you. Because the point is, they do not want people that immigrate here of the Muslim faith to embrace the American dream. That means they're going to lose them. So you have this very organized, highly funded effort by these activists, by these groups, by these imams, to fight against the United States, not embrace it. And there are numerous other quotes in my book. There's an imam at one of the biggest mosques in Michigan who said just, a year ago, he told everybody in the congregation, we need to fight Western civilization. Western civilization is over. We are the future. We need to fight it. So it begins with that. And then it begins with, again, in their own words, their hope that American apathy will serve their political agenda. They firmly believe that if they can achieve a population of, 10 or 11% in a certain area, they can win elections because the average American is, politically not that engaged. They don't vote. They certainly don't vote in primaries. And they use the Mamdani election in New York as an example. And people want to think, well, that's crazy New York. That's not where I live. They talked about this several years before, that if we can find a Muslim candidate that we can get behind, we can win the Democratic nomination because we can get our people out to vote, even though we're a small percentage of the population. And that's the model they are now going to replicate across the country. And they're very confident that they're going to have success. The final thing I would say, Allie, is that, again, there is an international component to this. I talk about this in the book. Mamdani's election in New York was watched very closely in Tehran, and it was also watched very closely by groups like Hezbollah, the terrorist group in Lebanon, because they see these victories in the United States as an opportunity to expand their sphere of influence within our own borders.
So tell me why the Muslim Brotherhood, Mexico, the Chinese Communist Party, who do not believe in things like transgenderism, disproportionately support progressivism and the Democrat Party in the United States.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's the most bizarre thing when you see the trans rights activist next to the devout, radicalized fundamentalist Muslim who would reject everything that the trans rights activists believe and how they're living their life. And the answer goes back to a meeting that sort of began what is called the Red-Green Alliance between the Marxists and the Islamists. It was a meeting in 2007 when the son and daughter of Che Guevara, the butcher of the Cuban Revolution, who, some college students wear a T-shirt with his image on it on college campuses. His adult children, who are atheist Marxists who live in Cuba, traveled to Tehran to meet with the mullahs. And according to the accounts of that meeting, the meeting did not get off to a good start. They started arguing about the existence of God, and they obviously had very different views on that. But eventually they brushed all that aside. And Allie, what they concluded and what they said after that meeting is, we disagree on a lot of things, but we agree on one thing, and that is the fundamental need to destroy the United States and Western civilization. So this is a marriage of convenience. And what I would say to my progressive friends out there, and I do have friends that I disagree with politically, is you should read the quotes in my book, because what the imams will tell you is this is a marriage of convenience. When we have won, we are going to deal with these people because we find these progressives, these atheists, these trans right activists abhorrent. And once we defeat Western civilization, don't worry, we're going to go deal with those people. Mm-hmm. So it is a marriage of convenience. They are going to divide the spoils, and then the Islamists are going to declare war on the progressives at that point in time.
Yeah, it's not that these Islamists actually agree with the values of progressivism. It's that the values of progressivism make them vulnerable to conquest. When you value, completely untethered to truth, by the way, tolerance and diversity and unconditional open-mindedness, unconditional acceptance and inclusion, you become very vulnerable to chaos. And so to me, that is why the CCP and these other groups that are really opposed to a lot of their principles take advantage of them and, take on progressivism like a skin suit. Last sponsor for the day is My Patriot Supply. So the Southeast has just been hit with a horrible winter storm. We don't deal well with snow and ice in the South. That is why I love My Patriot Supply, because if you run out of power or you can't go to the grocery store, you need this kind of food and preparedness gear on hand. Don't wait until we have another winter storm to wonder how you are going to take care of yourself and your family. Go ahead, go to mypatriotsupply.com/Allie and order their winter survival kit. All of their food, all of their gear lasts for years. Hopefully you'll never need it, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Right now with my link, when you order their winter survival kit from My Patriot Supply, you can also get a Vesta. A Vesta is an off-grid heater, and it uses something called canned heat, which is indoor safe fuel. So this is, again, a way to just prepare and protect your family in the next winter storm. And you can get that for free when you order their winter preparedness kit or winter survival kit. Go to mypatriotsupply.com/Allie. Take advantage of that deal right now. mypatriotsupply.com/Allie. Okay, gosh, there's so much more that I want to ask you. I've got two more questions quickly. We've talked about surrogacy and really the global surrogacy and trafficking industry that exists and how China in particular takes advantage of our immigration laws here and uses American surrogates to create Chinese American babies. Tell us what is going on behind the scenes there and why that is happening.
Yeah, this might be the most horrific thing that we uncovered. Look, we have this debate in the country about birthright citizenship, the 14th Amendment. Some people believe the 14th Amendment means that anybody born within the borders of the United States, that baby automatically gets U.S. citizenship. And I think a lot of people have a sense that, like, is this really a big deal? I mean, okay, somebody comes across the border, they live here 20 years, they happen to have a child. The problem is that China has an industrial scale exploitation of birthright citizenship that is creating a massive national security problem. And so what do I mean? Well, our federal government has no idea how many children have been born here that are getting birthright citizenship.
Yeah.
They have no idea, because when you get a birth certificate in the United States, it does not give the nationality of the parents. Nobody's tracking it. Our federal government doesn't know. China has encouraged this. They've encouraged it in the People's Daily, their biggest newspaper. They've told members of the Chinese elite, go to the United States, you can get citizenship for your kids. They allow a thriving industry where there are literally hundreds of companies that will make these arrangements for members of the Chinese elite. The question, of course, is why? Why would China want its elite to get U.S. citizenship? And I think we all kind of know what that answer probably is. But the scale here is the point I want to emphasize. The Chinese government has investigated this. Chinese research firms have looked at it, and they say that over the last 13 years, every single year, roughly 100,000 Chinese babies have been born in the United States. In other words, their parents fly here. The mother gives birth after a couple of weeks. When the baby is ready to travel, they fly back to China, and the child will be raised in China in CCP schools, with the CCP control, with CCP media. And the problem is, when they turn 18, they're going to be able to vote in the United States, and they're going to be able to contribute to political campaigns, and they're going to be able to apply for government jobs. So do the math. We're looking at more than 1 million, according to the Chinese government estimate, of quote unquote U.S. citizens, I'll put that in air quotes, who are being raised in China that are going to be able to start voting in our elections in just a couple of years.
Yeah.
Let's remember the 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, was settled by 72,000 votes. So this is a massive problem. You have the additional problem of surrogacy. This is when Chinese elites will hire a woman in the United States. They'll pay her $50,000 to $60,000 to carry their baby. When that baby is born, it will be given U.S. citizenship. It's born here. Its mother is also a U.S. citizen. We don't know the scale of this. The Chinese government has not looked into it. Again, it's openly advertised in China. But a couple of brief data points. Number one, we looked at Southern California, and we found 107 Chinese-owned surrogacy companies that are advertising these services in China. 107 just in Southern California. And the second data point is the Wall Street Journal ran a story about 5 weeks ago involving one man, a Chinese billionaire close to the CCP, who says that he alone by himself has more than 100 children that were born in the United States that are being raised in China right now. So this is a massive, massive vulnerability and problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's human trafficking, and it's not even just for the purpose of trafficking these humans and making money and all of this, but as you are arguing, this has long-term political consequences when you have this dual citizenship and they're being propagandized their whole lives against the United States, then can come back to the United States. So obviously we are talking about illegal immigration, but we're talking about legal immigration too. We are talking about not enforcing the laws on the books and the laws on the books not being what they should be. What do you see the Trump administration doing to combat all of the things that we've been talking about?
Well, very fortunate. Before the book came out, I had about an hour-long meeting with the president, the Treasury Secretary Besant, and
great.
also the Secretary of State Marco Rubio were in that meeting in the Oval Office. We laid out a lot of this information. I can't go into details, but I expect we're going to see some action from the Trump administration. I would also add that we had very good meetings on Capitol Hill with a number of U.S. senators and with James Comer, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee. I will be testifying before the Senate on the issue of China surrogacy and manipulation of birthright citizenship. I think it's on March the 10th. And I also have reason to believe that the administration and others are going to be using this information in the Supreme Court discussions on birthright citizenship. Those arguments, I think, will be occurring in a few weeks. And I just think it's vitally important for the Supreme Court justices to realize these are not random things that just kind of happen. This is highly organized. It is an industrial scale effort to mint U.S. citizens. And these U.S. citizens are being raised in China, and they will have the rights that all of us have who live here and participate and love America.
Peter, thank you so much. The Invisible Coup, How American Elites and Foreign Powers Use Immigration as a Weapon. This is the book that everyone needs to read right now to know what's really going on. Peter, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Allie. I enjoyed it.